Welcome, everybody, to Sports Fluent Fantasy Live. I'm Anthony K. This week, we're going to go through our starts and sits, our waiver wire pickups, our top performers from last week, and of course, your questions. And if I get them, I'll try to update you on what's happening in the NBA draft. Speaking of the NBA draft, let's take a quick recap of just the first three picks, which happened about an hour ago, because we knew that LaMelo Ball, Wiseman, and Anthony Edwards were probably going to go 1, 2, 3. It was just a matter of which order. Some of you had predicted LaMelo Ball going 1, Wiseman 2, and Anthony Edwards 3, which I liked because I like Anthony Edwards in Charlotte. However, they flipped it, and Anthony Edwards goes number 1 to Minnesota. So it'll be interesting to see how that trio works out in Minnesota. They have a shot at being pretty good this year. Then we have Wiseman going second to the Warriors. This is a huge pickup for the Warriors. I know there was a lot of talk about flipping the pick and maybe Andrew Wiggins and trying to get another star. But guys, I think Wiseman is actually a perfect fit for what they have in Golden State. Going Steph Curry back and healthy, Klay Thompson back and healthy, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and Wiseman, a 7'1" center with a 7'6" wingspan who can shoot, run the floor, block shots. This team's going to be scary again. As long as everyone stays healthy, this is a top 3 team in the West, just like that. If, assuming they round out the bench, it's a good team. So I'll try to update you on the rest of the draft. The Celtics just took Aaron Naismith, small forward out of Vanderbilt. So that's what's happening in the draft. Let's get to fantasy football. So we start our week, like we do every week, with our quarterback sits. Our first start this week is he's become really one of my favorite quarterbacks outside of fantasy. He wasn't supposed to start this year. It took a freak injury to Tyrod Taylor to get him into the lineup, and Justin Herbert is the real deal. He's so much fun to watch, and he's a start this week because he's playing the New York Jets. Yes, any quarterback playing against the Jets, guys, start him. Pretty much any offense starting against the Jets, you should start them. They've given up the 5th most points to quarterbacks in fantasy this year, so it's a great matchup for Herbert. He already looks good in any matchup, really. So look, Justin Herbert, a definite start this week. The next one, you're going to think back to last year, and you're going to say, but Anthony, he threw 30 picks. I know. But Jameis Winston in this offense, under Sean Payton, with Alvin Kamara to dump the ball off to, Emmanuel Sanders, Michael Thomas is healthy again. There's a great opportunity for this offense not to miss a beat. Now, is Jameis Winston going to be the second coming? Maybe. I think you forget that last year, even with those 30 picks, he was a top 5 fantasy QB. So, and as far as fantasy goes, Jameis Winston is a good pickup, especially if you need to stream a quarterback, or if Drew Brees was your quarterback. And it's a good matchup against the Falcons, who have given up the 2nd most fantasy points to quarterbacks playing at home this season. So you have a QB who was 5th last year overall in fantasy at the position, playing the team. He's at home, playing a team that is the 2nd most giving up points to fantasy QBs. It's a recipe for success. So Jameis Winston, a start this week. To our sits. So the first one is one that, from a fantasy perspective, I obviously am saying you should sit him. From an actual NFL perspective, I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to shake things up in Philly. Maybe it's time to give Jalen Hurts a try, because Carson Wentz just isn't doing much, right? I know that they're in first place technically, but with I think it's a 3-5-1 record. Carson Wentz, it's just not working, and this team, this offense needs a shot in the arm. So Carson Wentz, though, also a bad matchup this week against Cleveland. They've allowed the 5th fewest points to quarterbacks in fantasy. So definitely I'm sitting Carson Wentz. The next sit is another one of my guys who I like, but this week has a bad matchup against Washington. Washington has given up the 7 fewest points to quarterbacks in fantasy this year. So you're probably going to sit Joe Burrow if you can. To our sleepers. So this one is one where he's had a roller coaster season this year. At times he's looked really good. At times he's looked really bad. But Cam Newton is one that you should watch for. He's had 20 points per game. Houston has allowed 20 points per game to quarterbacks, and they're first in rushing yards allowed, something that Cam Newton still does a little bit. So he's a sleeper that, again, if you need a streaming quarterback or you had have an injury, take a look at Cam Newton. Then we have the one to watch out for. So this one's a little counterintuitive. I get it, but Ben Roethlisberger, coming off a big game with no practice, however, and on the road, is one to watch out for. Right? Most of you are still probably going to start him. Just be careful of what you get from Ben Roethlisberger this week. We head to our first question. Is Burkhead this year's James White for the Patriots? Well, if you mean, should you pick him up in a PPR league, and will he steal a bunch of from Damian Harris? Yeah, probably. As always with Bill Belichick, you got to be careful of those running backs. But Damian Harris is actually becoming one that is pretty reliable in a standard league format, not so much in PPR. But yeah, that's what Rex Burkhead will do, is he will steal some of those touchdowns like he did last week and take away those receptions. So yeah, I guess he is this year's James White. Let's go ahead and say that. To our running backs, we're starting this week. Ahmed of the Dolphins, assuming Matt Breida is not playing, because if he's not playing, right, we've seen the Dolphins, whether it was Gaskins or now Ahmed, they like having one back and giving him the workload. So Ahmed is a start this week. It's a good matchup against Denver. They give up 15 plus PPR points, I think 4 out of the last 5 weeks. So that's a good start this week. And we're going to get to this in waiver wire. Both of these guys are going to be talked about when we get there. But Nyheim Hines of the Colts, again, a matchup against the Green Bay Packers. They've given up the second most fantasy points to running backs this year. So even if, Jonathan Taylor and Wilkins take some of his touches away, he's still a good start because he's going up against the Packers, who give up a lot of fantasy points to running backs. I think personally, Hines is the one that's going to take over and be the lead back for the Colts moving forward. He hasn't done anything to this point that should have him taken that lead back away from him. Although I know they do like Jonathan Taylor. It looked like for a while the rookie was going to be the man there, and it's kind of flipped a little bit. So we'll see what Frank Reich does. But for now, I'm rolling with Hines. To our sits, my first one is out of LA, which, what do you do with that LA backfield between Darrell Henderson, Malcolm Brown, and Cam Akers? Right, Cam Akers hasn't really played a big enough role, but looks like he might be starting to. But I'm sitting Darrell Henderson against Tampa Bay, and my main reason is they're inconsistent with running the ball and who's running the ball. Of the three, I probably like Malcolm Brown the best. He had a nice week last week in regards to fantasy. So I'm sitting Darrell Henderson because I don't know what I'm going to get out of him. The next one is Melvin Gordon, who, appeared to start to, take over a little bit and then just quickly dropped off. We've seen a pickup from Philip Lindsay. He's playing against Miami this week, which is a tough matchup for running backs. Miami's defense is actually starting to really get rolling. They've not allowed a running back to score a touchdown in the last 4 weeks. So it's not a good matchup for Melvin Gordon. In terms of our sleepers, now this is dependent. Should Joe Mixon be out again this week, Giovanni Bernard against Washington is a nice option with, especially in PPR leagues. if Joe Mixon is out. The one to watch out for. So I've been hearing his name dropped a lot this week, waiver wires, pickups, etc. J.K. Dobbins of the Ravens is one to be careful of. That timeshare, now that Mark Ingram is back and healthy, Gus Edwards is in the mix. The Ravens really just give all three of them the ball, and none of them really do anything in fantasy. So just watch out if he's on your roster. To question number 2, which I told you we'd talk about, Nyheim Hines or Jonathan Taylor, who's the number one back for the Colts? I'm going Hines. I'm going to roll with Hines until somebody shows me something different. Early on, before the injury, if you remember back that far at the beginning of the season, I was really high on Marlon Mack. And you saw him come out of the gate, and he was looking pretty good. Obviously, that he got hurt, and he's been out of the mix. And it doesn't seem like they want to trust the rookie to really be the workhorse out of the backfield. So I'm going to roll with Hines, like I said, until I see something different out of the Colts. So I like Hines in that one. To our wide receivers, our first start, he had a bad week last week. I know. So this is why it would be a good, nice, sneaky pick for you to start him. But Christian Kirk at Seattle, who is the number one, they give up the most points to wide receivers out of any in fantasy. So even though DeAndre Hopkins obviously is going to get the bulk of the workload there, there's enough to go around, and Christian Kirk is going to have a nice game at Seattle. So I'm looking to start Christian Kirk. The next one, I like this kid. I have him on my main fantasy team, and I made a mistake not starting him last week because he was going up against the Bears. It was a bad matchup, and the Bears did a good job on Delvin Cook. They did a good job on Adam Thielen, but they did not do a good job on Justin Jefferson. And this week, he's going to Dallas, who's allowed the 4th most points to wide receivers. He has proven to be a guy that can get it done. So Justin Jefferson is a start this week in fantasy. Next up is our sits, and our first one is Corey Davis. 1, because he has a terrible matchup this week against Baltimore. 2, because he plays most of the snaps on the outside, and Baltimore's only allowed 2 outside receivers touchdowns this season. So it's a bad matchup. I'd stay away from it if I could. The next one is MVS, yes. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who had a nice week last week and a really great play if you watch the Packer game. This week against the Colts, there's 2 things going against him. 1, he's going against the Colts, and they're a tough defensive team against